I'm good. Are you good? She's good. I'm good. Are you good? You all good out there? All right. Well, then I guess maybe we should think about getting started, huh? Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Darrin Crow, like the bird. Caw! I love crows. And I love stories. I like them any way I can get them, in books or movies or TV or plays or just talking to people. I love a good story. And, well, I brought a few with me today that I thought I'd share with you. You look like an intelligent bunch of people.
I'm not.
That's all right, I'll talk slow.
I am.
Now, are any of you fast?
Super.
Okay, some of you are. Do you like to run? I love to run. Okay, that's really an exaggeration because I haven't run for about 25 years. I like the idea of running. Now, are you fast? All right, now, this story is about a couple of very fast people. The story is called Princess Zalicki. Are any of you girls named Zalicki? No? Well, I guess it's not as common a name as I thought. Now, our story today does not actually start with the princess, though. It starts with Janosch. Now, are any of you boys named Janosch? All right, well, Janosch is a young prince. He's, 17, 18 years old enough to go out into the wide, wide world on his own. His father, the king, called him. Janosch, you are a young man now. It is time for you to go off into the wide, wide world to seek your fortune, to learn about life. Well, don't just stand there, get going. And so, off he went. Well, he had not gone too far when he came across a stranger on the road. And this guy was tall. He had to be 7 feet tall. And skinny. This guy was thin. If he turned sideways and stuck out his tongue, he'd look like a zipper. He had to wear skis in the bathtub to keep from going down the drain. Janosch walked up to the stranger and he said, "Hello there, friend. What's your name?" And the tall, thin man looked down and said, "My name is Lightning Fast." Kind of a strange name. He said, "Why do they call you that?" "Because I can run faster than just about anything in the world." You know, everybody says even a cheetah. Now, if I were in Africa for this story, I would say suddenly a cheetah leaped up and ran across the savannah. But we are not in Africa, we're somewhere in Europe. And so, all of a sudden a deer leaped up and ran across the forest. And in a moment, Lightning Fast went, phew, and he had left that deer behind. He was so fast. Janosch looked at him and said, "Lightning Fast, you should probably travel with me. I'm out to seek my fortune. We'll share our food and we'll share whatever money we make along the way." And so, off they went together. Now, when they'd been walking for a few miles, they came to the edge of the forest that they were in, and there in front of them was a great, big, tall mountain. And at the bottom of the mountain was a mountain of a man. I mean, this guy was... I know, try not to be too amazed at these muscles. This guy's muscles had muscles on top of their muscles. He didn't just have a six-pack, he had like a 30-pack. And pudding. Janos and Lightning Fast came up to him. They said, "Hello, friend. Who are you?" "My name is Kerry's Mountains." Okay, at the risk of sounding obvious, why do they call you that? The man got down at the base of the mountain, and he dug in a hand, and he dug in a hand, and he went... And he picked up the whole mountain. He moved it over a few inches, and he set it back down again. And Lightning Fast and Janos went, "Gung." "You better travel along with us." And so the three of them headed down the road together. A few hours later, they came out into a field of tall grass. And you guys see kind of tall grass. If you put your hands up like this, oh, look at the grass waving back and forth in the breeze. But as they came through, the breeze began to blow a little faster. What would it sound like? And the wind got stronger and stronger, and suddenly it stopped. And when it stopped, they looked over, and at the far edge of the field, there was a man going, "Whew." And they walked up to him, and they said, "Hello, friend. Who are you?" He said, "My name is Windblower." And they all said, "Why?" And Windblower went, and half the forest blew away in front of him. And they said, "Yeah, you come with us." So let's see. Now we have Janos and Lightning Fast and Kerry's Mountains and Windblower. Okay. As they came into the next clearing, at the far side of the clearing, they saw a man just drawing a bow and arrow. And they said, "Wait, don't shoot, it's just us." So they came up to the man and they said, "Who are you?" And the man said, "They call me Ameswell." And they all together said, "Why?" And he said, "Because I can shoot so well that if I drew my bow, I could shoot a pea out of someone's hand and they wouldn't notice." Janos said, "Oh, I'd like to see that." And so Ameswell gave him a pea. And the prince went to one side of the field. Ameswell went to the other end. He took his bow, he grabbed an arrow, he drew it back. Phew. Well, he didn't promise he wouldn't hit a child. But he did knock the pea out of the prince's hand. And they all agreed that Ameswell should come along with them. And so off they went. Well, sir, it wasn't long before they came across a man lying on the ground. And like this. And Janos said, why are you lying on the ground? The man got up and said, because if I put my ear to the ground, I can hear everything in the world, no matter how quiet or how far away. Janos said, wow, that's pretty amazing. What's your name? Here's actually the man said, my name is Bob. And so, off down the road went Janos, and Lightning Fast, and Carries Mountains, and Windblower, and Ameswell, and Bob. Now, it turns out that on their journey, they came to the borders of fairyland. Now, if you know much about fairy tales, you know that fairies are not always the cute little tiny things with wings, giving out wishes and fairy dust. In a lot of stories, the fairies are great big people who are kind of scary. Now, in this kingdom, the king of the fairies had a daughter, and her name was Zalicki. Now, Zalicki was the fastest person in all of fairyland. There was nobody who could beat her in a race. In fact, the name Zalicki means little wind. And it just turns out that Zalicki was about the right age to get married. And the king made a proclamation. He said, my daughter is of age to be married. I decree that any man who may beat her in a race may have her hand in marriage. Girls, isn't that a great way for your parents to pick out a husband for you? It's a great plan, right? Yeah. Well, as you can imagine, the idea was very appealing to all kinds of princes and knights and barons until they heard the second half of the proclamation. Any man who loses the race against my daughter will also lose his head. Now that ought to discourage people, right? Oh, but you know a challenge like this is like candy for a prince or a knight. I mean, princes and knights and barons were coming from all over the place to race the princess. And they'd line up, and the princess would just smoke them. She'd leave them so far behind. And then, and the king would stick them up on a pike on the castle wall. Until at last there were 99 heads along the castle wall. Ew! That is just gross. Well, into this comes Janos and his friends. Now, they hear about the king's proposal, and they bring Lightning Fast right up to the king, and they say, yeah, Your Majesty, our friend Lightning Fast would like to try this. And the king said, excellent! I'd like to make it an even 100 heads on the wall. And so, Lightning Fast and Zalicki lined up to race. Hello, princess. You're very pretty. I hope you don't mind losing. Oh, we shall see. I hope you don't mind losing your head. On your mark, get set, go. She's a princess. That's how she runs. Except really, really fast, because that was slow motion. And my goodness, I mean, she shot out of there like a tornado. But Lightning Fast, he shot out like a hurricane. And before she had gotten halfway across the race field, he was at the finish line. And Zalicki looked and she went, She is a little bit spoiled. Nobody ever beat her in a race. The king was furious. He said, "Oh, something must have gone wrong. Clearly the princess is not feeling up to her best. We shall have another race again tomorrow." He is the king. I guess he can break his own rules. So the next morning, hello again, princess. That was really fun yesterday. I hope you don't mind losing again. We'll just see about that. On your marks, get set, go. Off she flew. But it was like she was a turtle or something. Because lightning fast was across the finish line before people could blink. And there was the Licky standing in the middle of the field going, "Oh! Oh! Well, you know, in special cases like this, we do the best 2 out of 3. Or 5. At any rate, we shall race again tomorrow." Now that evening, Princess Zalicki put on her very prettiest dress. And she went to see Lightning Fast. She said, "Hello, Lightning Fast. My, aren't you just a handsome fellow? And you're ever so fast. My goodness, I've never seen anyone as fast as you." Thank you, Princess. That's very nice of you. I hope you don't mind losing again tomorrow. Oh, let's not get ahead of ourselves. But I have had such a good time racing you. I wanted to give you a present. I wanted to give you this diamond ring. Oh, Princess, that's beautiful. Nobody's ever given me anything like that before. Thanks. I'll see you tomorrow. Have fun losing. Yes, well, we'll see about that, won't we? Okay, is she trying to cheat? Oh, yeah, she went straight back to her room. And her maid asked her, she said, "Princess, why did you go and see that man?" "Well, because I gave him my diamond ring." "What'd you do that for?" "Because it's magical, and when he tries to run tomorrow, he'll be stuck to the ground like a tree that's put down roots." Dirty trick. And you know, she'd have gotten away with it, too, if it wasn't for the fact that Bob was around. He was laying on the floor with his ear to the ground, and he heard the whole thing. And he thought, "Oh, I've got to get Lightning Fast out of this problem. He can't run with that ring on his finger, or at least he can't run with the diamond in the ring, because that's probably what's magical about it. How could we get that diamond out of there? Who could we use to do that?" Which of their friends might be able to do that? What do you think? Carrie's Mountains is strong. He could just rip his finger off. That option we better save for last. Ameswell could shoot the diamond out of the ring, couldn't he? And so Bob went to Ameswell and said, "Look, tomorrow, just as he's starting the race, you've got to shoot the diamond out of his ring or he won't be able to run." Well, in the morning, the Princess and Lightning Fast lined up. "Hello, Princess. I'm ready to run. I hope you're feeling good." "Oh, yes. We'll just see how the race goes today, won't we?" On your mark, get set, go. And off she went faster than she had ever run in her life. And Lightning Fast went, "Good. Good. 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 Ah!" And as he stretched out his hand, Ameswell drew his bow and went, phew. And pling! The diamond went flying out of the ring, and lightning fast went. And he crossed the finish line a long time before the princess. And she went, oh! Now everybody was upset because the princess was going to have to marry lightning fast. But, you see, she kind of, well, she'd been watching Janos the last few days, and she thought she might not mind losing a race to him. But Lightning Fast and his friends went to the king, and they said, Your Majesty, our friend Lightning Fast here really doesn't want to marry the princess. And the king said, phew. Well, what would you like then? I tell you what, King, we'll take a reward of gold and silver. That's an excellent plan. I'd love to give you a reward of a little gold and silver. In fact, I'll be generous. I will give you as much gold and silver as one of you can carry. Who do you suppose they asked to carry it? They loaded up 6 wagons with gold and silver. And Carrie's Mountains went, ugh. I could do more. They loaded up 6 more wagons with gold and silver. He wasn't even starting to sweat yet. The king was out of gold and silver. They went around the palace. They rolled up the fancy carpets. They took down the oil paintings off the wall, the chandeliers, the PS2 and the DVD player and the 72-inch flat screen TV. In fact, when they were all done, there wasn't anything left in the palace at all. And Carrie's Mountain said, that'll do. Now, as soon as they had left, the king regretted his decision. Because he didn't have anything left in his palace. So he called his daughter, Zuliki, come here. Now, I want you to run after those fellas. And the princess went, ooh. She liked that Janos kid. I want you to run after them, and don't you leave them behind. I'm going to pretend like they have kidnapped you. And I will send the army along to capture them and... Now, get going, lass. Princess Zuliki jumped up and she ran as fast as she could to catch up to them. When she did, she went to Janos and she said, Janos, the king has sent me along to you. He's going to pretend like you've tried to kidnap me, and he's sending the army after you. I can see them now. How will we escape from them? Well, is there anybody in their group of friends that could help them escape? What do you think? Well, Lightning Fast could run fast. He could get away. Windblower. In fact, Windblower said, do not worry. I've got this. And sure enough, 1,000 soldiers and horses went. And Janos and Zuliki and their friends made it back to his castle. And they were married. And of course, they lived happily ever after. No, nobody died. Now, I have another story for you. And I am particularly fond of this story for several reasons. Number one, I learned it when I was about your age. So I've always liked it. Number two, the story is true. The people in this story really did live, and the things that happened to them really did happen. And number three, the story happened here in Iowa. Yeah. Now, it happened a long time ago, about 140-ish years ago, in 1881. So before there were cars, before there were electric lights, before there were all kinds of things like that. Now, the story starts in the afternoon on July 6th of 1881. It starts at a little farm out in western Iowa near the town of Boone. It's, in fact, the Shelley farm. Kate is 15 years old. She lives there with her mom and two little sisters who are 6 and 8, and a brother who is 4. Her dad has died. He passed away a couple of years before this. Her mom isn't in very good health. So a lot of the time she's in bed. And, well, Kate's the oldest. So she does most of the cooking. She does most of the farming. And all that day she'd been out plowing and working in the fields. And now she had just finished milking the cows for the afternoon. It had been a pretty beautiful day. Warm, but sunny. But as she was coming out of the barn, she noticed that way off in the west, it was starting to get pretty cloudy. As she put things away, it wasn't just cloudy, it was dark. The air started to get still. And you know how you can kind of smell the electricity in the air? And as she walked toward the house, way off in the distance, she could hear boom, 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 the rumble of thunder. Just as she went in the door, the rain started. And boy, let me tell you, it only came down in little drops for a few seconds before it was like somebody turned on the faucet. It poured buckets. The lightning flashed and the thunder rattled the windows in the house. There was not a tornado, oddly enough. Now, nobody felt like doing much of anything except sitting by the big windows in the farmhouse watching the rain. All through the evening, Kate and her sisters and brother sat there watching the lightning, hearing the thunder, and watching Honey Creek, the little creek at the bottom of their farm, get higher and higher and higher. About 8 o'clock that night, once it had started to get good and dark, she saw that the water was getting closer to their barn where the cows and the horses were. And she said, oh, I'll be in trouble if that floods. So she put on an old hat and an old coat, and she went down to the barn, and she opened up the barn doors and shooed the horses and the cows out so they could go farther up the hill. And sure enough, by the time she was done with that, the water was well up over her feet. And she sloshed back up to the house. Nobody felt like going to bed that night. They stayed right there by the window. And instead of getting quieter and going away, the storm only got more intense. I mean, every time that thunder rattled, they were sure the lightning was going to strike the whole house. The rain was just coming down in sheets. At about 10 o'clock, she heard a whistle off in the distance. One of the trains that went past her house every day. She thought, oh, they've sent an engine along the tracks to check and see if there's been any damage from the storm. And a couple of minutes later, she heard another whistle, and then something they shouldn't have heard. They heard the crack of wood and the crunch of metal and the hiss of steam hitting the water, and she thought, oh no, the railroad bridge over Honey Creek is broken and the engine's gone in the water. She grabbed her lantern and that hat and coat, and she ran down to the edge of the creek, and sure enough, the engine in going across the bridge, well, the flood had weakened the bridge and the train had gone right in the water. She looked. 2 of the men on the train had managed to grab onto tree branches that were in the water. She tried to call out to them, but the thunder and the wind and the rain just blew the sound of her voice away. She was trying to think of what to do, and then she thought, oh no, that train is just checking the tracks. At midnight, there's an express train that will come through from Moingona to Boone, and it'll have hundreds of passengers on it, and they don't know that this bridge is out. If they come through, they'll crash too, and everybody on the train could die. She didn't know what to do now. It was a good 2 miles to the next railroad station where she could warn somebody, and she realized she was the only person that knew what had happened. And so she thought, well, I guess if I don't do it, nobody will be able to save him. And so she took her lantern and she headed along the tracks. As the tracks turned, they came along the edge of the Des Moines River. which was getting higher and higher. The station at Moingona was on the other side of the river, and there was only one way to cross it, and that was on the railroad bridge. As she came up to that railroad bridge, she held up her light, but only lit up a few feet in front of her. There was a big blast of lightning, and she could see almost to the other side of the bridge. It was so far off. The railroad company did not want people walking across their bridge because they thought it was dangerous. So they had taken out all of the flooring on the bridge. All they left was the rails and the cross ties. Each cross tie was about 4 feet apart. Kate got down on her knees, and she put a hand on one of the rails, and then she felt out until she felt the next tie and stretched across. As she came up, her knee caught on one of the splinters in the wood. As she headed across, she realized to keep people from going across the bridge, the railroad company had driven extra spikes into the ties. Her hands and knees kept catching on them and cutting. Halfway across the bridge, she looked up, and there was a huge flash of lightning, and she could see an entire great oak tree coming down the river toward her. She could see every leaf. She could see the dirt still clinging to the roots of the tree. And she thought, oh no, that's going to hit the bridge, and it's going to knock the bridge down and take me with it. Everything went black as the lightning went away. In the next flash of lightning, she saw the tree just at the bridge, and it swung and went just underneath. Splashed a huge wave of water over her as it went. She kept crawling. A gust of wind caught the lantern and smashed it against the bridge. And then it was out. And now she was in complete darkness. The only way she kept going across the bridge was by feeling. And finally, after what seemed like hours, she felt dirt on the far side of the bridge, and she thought, oh. She made it across the bridge. She tried to stand up. She was almost completely exhausted. Still had the broken lantern in her hand. But there was still almost a mile to go to get to Moingona. And she knew she had to get there, so she ran as hard as she could. Finally, she could see the light from the station, and she ran. She banged on the door until somebody opened the door, and she tried to spit out, the bridge at Honey Creek is out. There's an engine in the water. You got to stop the express. And then she fainted. The people at the station thought she was crazy. But somebody finally figured out what she had said. They ran out, they got their red lanterns and flags and stood on the tracks and stopped the express train. And she saved the lives of everyone on the train. The next day when she woke up, she was a national hero. The station master had telegraphed out word to the next stations, and they had telegraphed word on out to newspapers. And everybody in the country knew that this 15-year-old girl had saved the train. Reporters and important people and well-wishers surrounded her farm for days and days. The people on the train, they pooled together their money and raised enough money to pay off the mortgage on her farm. The little girls of Dubuque gave her a gold medal and a fountain. The state of Iowa gave her another gold medal and a $200 reward. And the railroad company was so grateful, they gave her a lifetime pass on their train. So that anytime she wanted to travel, she would stand outside the farmhouse and wave, and the engineer would stop the train for her so she could get on. And when she grew up, she became the station master at the little station at Moingona, where she had saved the train. And that is the story of Kate Shelley and how a very, very frightened 15-year-old girl managed to overcome the storm and the river and fear and exhaustion and save a whole crowd of people. Boy, hopefully none of us will ever have to do that. But we're probably going to go up against other scary things in our lives, aren't we? Yeah. And even things that aren't maybe so scary. We might run into somebody at school that's getting picked on, or somebody that's getting bullied. And it might be a frightening thing to stand up and say, hey, stop, that's not the way we ought to treat people. And when we come across things like that, I hope that one thing you can remember is Kate Shelley, and somebody who stood up and did what was right even though it was terrifying. But that is the story of Kate Shelley. There you go. I have time for one more short one. Since these stories have been about races, Princess Siliki and Lightning Fast racing, Kate Shelley racing to get the train, here's one more. It's from Grimm's Fairy Tales. It is called The Hare and the Hedgehog. Now, you know what a hare is, right? A rabbit. And hedgehogs, of course, are those delightful little animals with soft tummies and sharp, spiky spines on their backs. I love them so much. I really would like one. They're kind of like porcupines, only different. Now, one fine morning, Mr. and Mrs. Hedgehog were in their hedgehog hole, and they were just finishing up their breakfast. Mr. Hedgehog was drinking his morning tea. Mrs. Hedgehog, I think that I should go out and see how my cabbages are progressing. Mr. Hedgehog was very fond of cabbages. He had a whole field of them. And so he set his cup down, and he set out down the road. Are you laughing at Mr. Hedgehog's legs? It is true, he had funny-looking legs. Now, on the way down, he met up with Mr. Hare. Now, Mr. Hare was tall and fast and elegant, and he knew it. And so Hedgehog said, "Good morning, Mr. Hare. How are you?" "Out for a morning walk. I'm just going to check on my cabbages." "Oh, yes. Well, it's a wonder you can walk at all, Mr. Hedgehog, with those funny-looking legs of yours." That was very rude, wasn't it? That is not the way anybody should talk. Well, that made Hedgehog mad. He was very sensitive about his legs, and he said, "Oi! My legs may be little and funny, but they can outrun you any day of the week, I'll tell you that." "Oh, don't be ridiculous. There's no way that you could be faster than me." "Oh, yes, I am. I bet you a gold coin I could beat you in a race across this field right now." "You've got your bet. I'll race you right this moment." "Well, I'm not ready right this moment." "You give me 20 minutes, and I'll meet you right back here, and I'll beat you." And Hedgehog waddled home as fast as he could go. Mrs. Hedgehog was just doing up the dishes. And he burst in and said, "Mrs. Hedgehog, put down those dishes and go put on my other overalls and my other hat so you look just like me." "Why would I do that? I look silly. Don't bother me with questions, just do it." And so she put on his other overalls and his other hat, and they looked exactly alike. And off down the road they went together. "Now, Mrs. Hedgehog, I have bet Mr. Hare that I can beat him in a race across the field." "Why'd you do that? You can't do that." "I know. That's why I'm going to need your help. Now, when we get to the field, you go hide at that end. I will start the race from this end. Before he can cross the finish line, you pop up and say, 'Here I am!' And he'll never know it's not me." And that is what they did. Mrs. Hedgehog went and hid at this end of the field. Hare and Hedgehog met up at the far end. "Ah, Hedgehog, I hope you brought that piece of gold with you. I'll be taking it with me shortly." "We'll just see, sir, we'll just see. On your marks, get set, go!" And Hare zipped off down the field. Hedgehog went a little ways, and then he dropped down in the cabbages. And before the hare could cross the finish line, up popped Mrs. Hedgehog and said, "Here I am!" "How did you do that? You can't have beaten me." "No, we'll do it again. On your marks, get set, go!" And off he went, but before he could cross the finish line, up popped Mr. Hedgehog. "Here I am!" Again, on your mark, get set, go! "Here I am! Here I am!" 72 times. Finally, on the 73rd time, the poor hare just flopped down among the cabbages, and he said, fine. Fine, I admit it. Your little legs are faster than my big ones. You win. Now, the Grimm brothers put a moral at the end of the story. And for them, the moral, the lesson we should learn is that you should marry someone who looks a good deal like you. Which is a horrible moral. I mean, you'd be in really bad shape if we had... Or I guess if you married someone who looked like you, you'd be in good shape. But that's the story of the Hare and the Hedgehog. There you go. Now, my friends, I've told myself out of stories for today. The good thing, though, is you are in a library, which is entirely chock full of stories. And there are librarians like Mary who know where all of the books are. And so if you go and talk to one of these librarians and tell them what you're interested in, they will help you find the books that you will love. And believe me, there's a book out there for all of you. Now, spend a lot of your summer reading, because it's awful fun. Pester those librarians to no end. Keep them busy. And thank you very much for being such a good audience. I appreciate it. Thanks.